Welcome back to VibeCode. I am your resident tech and business nerd, Jamie Burgess. Today, I'm sad to say we're starting to wrap up the season, but finishing strong with a conversation about what happens after an organization identifies an idea worth pursuing. We will explore how strategy, roadmaps, and rapid execution work together in the age of AI-augmented coding, and how teams turn concepts into meaningful business impact. Joining me is a fellow Jamie who has helped organizations navigate this exact journey. Thanks for being here, Jamie. Do you want to explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Jamie Mann, and right now I'm a practice lead in the go-to-market services team in delivery.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, it's not a surprise to anyone, especially you, Jamie, that I love building cool things. So to start us off, when organizations adopt AI-augmented coding, what changes about how they move into sort of real from prototype and go from ideation to a valuable product over the last at least 6 months, if not a year?
There's a lot of things that have changed with AI development coming in. The first thing starts with the planning cycle. And I imagine in some of the other interviews you did, you talked about planning cycles being shortened. You're able to come in and actually do planning with the client. And that shortens this period of time where we traditionally would go in and do an assessment. So there's both a shortening of time and then there's a cost savings that goes along with it. And then as we actually do the software development, it's iterative and the client can see and give real-time feedback on whatever it is we've developed to date. And you can get to an MVP much, much faster and then build on that iteratively and very quickly. So the time to realize value can be much quicker. And you can also see, for example, where you used to target the ROI on something and say, we're pretty sure we're going to get to ROI in this period of time. And then sometimes it just didn't work out, or you'd say, we're not actually going to hit ROI. You can see right away whether you need to tweak something to start to get to the ROI that you want to see.
Yeah, I love that. And we have a KPI that we've just introduced called customer time to value internally. And I think just because we want to track how that's changing, and we've definitely seen, like, it depends on the project, of course. Like some of these behemoths that Valorum and Reply do are like with legacy systems have a different impact, like we discussed in a previous episode. But Greenfield, like personally, I can go from napkin to the client clicking around and playing with it so much faster, like you say. And I think what I've observed is like this huge AI explosion dropped squarely in the middle of the software development cycle, like right in the middle of the code building, and it's slowly pushed outwards. So it's gone in upstream into thinking, researching, analyzing, looking at market fit and some of the business architect stuff that you guys do. And then it's pushed further down into the testing, QA, and then pipeline management and stuff as well. So it's kind of interesting. It's like rippled outwards. And the models were predominantly, and I was watching I think it was a YouTube episode yesterday about how the models were all designed to start with maths and coding because they're binary responses and they're really easy to figure out. So, and I think now we're starting to see this ripple effect, which is great. So I guess now we see all this experimentation. Experimentation is good and highlights a lot of challenges in an organization. And so what strategic alignment do you see? Why is it so important with between teams that are experimenting with AI and prototyping all these new concepts that they have?
That's a really, really big one. So there are some clients that we have tried this approach in and didn't have alignment that we should have had. And I would say alignment needs to be at the CVX level, so the CVP of whatever, and then GM level at a minimum. And the reason for that is because, number one, fundamentally, they need to understand where they need to push their organization to embrace the iterative and AI practices. Yep. Because what they used in the old SDLC is just going to go slower. And they're going to hit friction points with those groups where the groups are going to question the AI practices and the ability to go quickly, and not understand that the iteration is part of, number one, prototyping. It's part of the development process. It isn't the final product, but they'll question the legitimacy of that process itself. And that, you need your executives to be aligned to say, this is something that we're doing to push the speed of iteration, not necessary to create the final product.
That's actually really interesting. So in other episodes, we've talked about like, don't rush it. The speed will come when you improve your processes. And you're saying that, like, almost reinforcing that message, which is, yes, and speed will come, but expect speed because it is iterative and we can accelerate that, but only when there is strategic alignment. And I've personally observed a lot of, because I wasn't a traditional consultant, but now I'm doing more consultancy. I come in and people are often like, I've got this idea for a thing, and that would be built in the traditional sense. AI has given us the ability to like step back a bit and say, well, actually, what's the problem you're trying to solve, and what are your objectives you're trying to yield to, and then design around that. And it means once you have the problem well defined, I mean, it sounds like a really silly thing to say, but like sometimes we get a pre-packaged notion of what they think the client thinks we should build, and actually when you start asking questions, it starts to shape more around what they actually need. That has become more iterative and so much faster in of itself. But what I love, like, you know, there's no surprise really, is like this is my happy place. Jamie, see me do this a lot of time, is with AI coding kind of changing at the speed of which teams can test stuff. Rapid prototyping is like my jam. And so coming into a client, building something really quickly that just about works, so that then the client can click about and see stuff. How do you see that helping, let's say, the early phase of, I mean, it's technically the SDLC, but it's really just the design and the spec capture phase, like what the client really wants. How have you seen that impact in the last 4 or 5 deals that we worked together on?
The very quick back and forth, so you can just very quickly do a litmus test to say, in a BizArcs, you're supposed to be the voice of the customer always. And one of the things that we do is listen to the customer problem space and need. But frequently what happens is, in consulting, let me go away and come back with a pitch that I think meets your needs. But with this new type of methodology that we're using, you're able to very quickly, you know, go in there, code something real quick, VibeCode.
I mean, that's what I do.
90 minutes, right? Come out, and then very quickly you can say, does it look anything like this? And then the client very quickly goes, it's not a Mona Lisa, it's a Renoir. And you're like, oh, okay. Impressionist, not this, right? So you can super quickly just change your direction. And that is very helpful. It, as I said earlier, cuts down on cycles, and it also shows the client that you understood the direction that they gave you. And that fundamentally builds trust in the relationship, but it also gets much quicker to the product that they're looking for.
Yeah, and like there's been a couple of examples where we've delivered something to the customer within 30 minutes to a day to like go through, because I find us, certainly me, I'm speaking from personal experience, but I find us as a species very visual, right? We like reading a spec doc. You could give the same spec doc to 10 different people and they would all have 10 different ideas of what it would look like. I think the biggest hang up with people deploying stuff is what the UI is. Like, how does the human interface with the product? The product will do the same thing. It will, you know, manage SharePoint calendars on a back end this, or it will manage orders for this connected to this, and like everyone will kind of visualize, or everyone can imagine what that looks like, but very few people can actually visualize how that would come to life. And with the rapid prototyping stuff, it's presented to them in a way they're like, oh, I can see that, but then they could either like it or dislike it. And so you could, with the throwaway code bar being so much higher, like I could code for 30 minutes and not worry about it, throw it away and do it again. And I think that has really changed what we can offer to customers, and certainly they feel like they're in on the journey as well, rather than like going back into our old hermit shells for 2 weeks, building something and then going ta-da, and then we're like, oh, well, that's close. So yes, I think we hit the target a lot faster and more accurately too. So I love that. And so one of the things Mifuna talked about in episode 1 was spec engineering, which is kind of this idea of going from prompt engineering to now spec-led engineering, which I think is kind of a great definition, or the great natural evolution of prompt engineering. So once there is clarity and direction, how do teams think about road mapping in an environment where there is just this, you know, immense AI acceleration potential?
AI can do great things, but fundamentally, it still needs to be led based on business problem and opportunity space. So it's still really critical that biz arcs like myself meet with the customer and find out what they're trying to do in their business. Like ultimately, it's January. If your fiscal year just started in January, what are you trying to do over the course of the year with said program or business? In a partner ecosystem, are you trying to make better partners, or are you trying to have your partners make more money per partner? Like, what are the goals? And then with that, as you write specs, you write AI to help you write specs, you write prompts to help you write specs. Are you trying to build systems that optimize incentive programs or profile risk with each partner? So the roadmap is based on what the goals of the customer still are, not what AI necessarily tells you is like trending in the market, if that makes sense.
Yep.
You still have to maintain that real relationship and understanding the value to the customer.
Yeah, I am. Something that Jason said to me is stuck with me. I was only maybe a couple of weeks into role, and Jason looks after, for the those who don't know, the tech side of the house for Bullhorn Reply, and we'll be chatting to him next about an exec summary. And he said, "Find the edges." Like one of his phrases. I really like that idea, which is, the customer comes with this preconceived notion, and spending a bit more time with them in your role, understanding what the constraints are from an engineering perspective, but also what the goals are. And sometimes the client may miss some KPI ideas or some incentive or some direction or whatever, because of everyone brings their inherent bias about the solution that they have. And your part of the process is basically to understand more and ask questions more with the customer about, hey, well, we can do all these other things which are useful to you, which are not, which inherently uncovers more opportunity for them and greater targeting for their outcome. So I love that. And one of the things I've noticed is AI is very good at, answering questions, sure. But the real value of AI is finding a needle in a haystack, looking at some documentation and saying, hey, you haven't thought about this, or presenting, I'm going to build this tool that does the 3 things the customer wants, but actually we should be thinking about these other 3 things, and then building it to like a matrix of KPIs and objectives and stuff. So I really like the way that this has evolved. And so as you get to roadmap planning, what does that look like from a process perspective for you with this sort of like crazy uncertainty?
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that. So innovation doesn't equal value on its own, right? People think that it does. Like, we're innovating, so it's valuable. Not necessarily. It's doing exactly what you said, which is more like anomaly profiling or profiling something, finding the anomalies, and then saying, with all the anomalies, is there enough common ground that something should be developed that you can innovate on that will create value? An example of that is in ecosystem partner risk profiling. You have partners who are abusing the system, and you create a rule set that constantly identifies when they break the rules. You would like AI to begin telling you when they are creating patterns that may begin breaking rules that you don't even know that you should have created, right? There is value in that. So building roadmaps with customers, for example, we're doing this right now, we're telling our clients we should be thinking about the next steps and sets of patterns that get created, and have AI identify those so that we can build back in the protections in the future, versus all of the common things that you automate today. Because one of the things that people also like to do is just automate common workflows that exist today using AI.
Yeah, and I've seen that across a multitude of industries, these sort of transformational leading indicators that, if left alone, end up being problematic. So, like you said there with sales or partner behavior, or, it could be that a vibration sensor in a milling machine's picked up a certain, type of vibration left unattended to will mean the machine will break. And then typically AI is very good at organizing a service person structure to align it around And actually, if you could pick up that that wear and tear on that part before it happens, then you can actually go and address it. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity space, is to say, once you've built a thing, or while you're building the thing, think about indicators. Let AI highlight indicators that are going to call out those, and then you can improve them. Obviously you can update them as you learn new things. But I think there's another opportunity is, and just so everyone else is aware, I've often used the language of 3 different AIs, right? There's personal AI, which is what I use day to day. Could be my voice assistant, it could be my calendar management, but it's personal to me. Then there's organizational AI, which is what am I using with my peer-to-peer engagement. So it could be organizing calendars, it could be booking meetings, it could be workflows, it could be bots, whatever, or agents. And then there's productizable AI, and that's what am I putting inside of my products that help me sell better, do better, or offer better things to my customers. Okay, so going back to prototyping, once we've got a prototype, what does testing and validation look like, and how do teams decide what moves forward and what gets refined and what gets canned?
It depends on the client. However, some of the processes that we use today is, as we actually do a pitch for the work and put together a statement of work, we ask for a business SME and a technical SME. And what that essentially means is we want someone from the business side who can validate the way that we structure the requirements with them. So what we intake is what the business does or needs to do. Mm-hmm. And then the technical SME is someone that we hope in the future, whether we do the maintenance ongoing, so the sustained engineering, or they do the maintenance and sustained engineering ongoing, that person basically has the ability to take what has been developed and then tweak or modify prompts and work so that the agent can continue to work ongoing. So we usually ask for those 2 people. Those people are heavily involved in the process. So as we prototype and we actually move to a stage where we say we have like these 4 things that we prototyped, or these 2 things that we prototyped. What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? What do you want to keep? The client really leads that discussion and decides entirely what moves forward. And then we decide to kick off like an official building of a thing, an agent, or an agentic service. And when we move to agentic service, we involve those SMEs after we finish development, and we validate what we've been building. Mm-hmm. And then we go through all of the stages of handoff using the technical SME. So nothing gets through without having really close client involvement. And I'd say most of our teams that are going through this process meet with their clients between daily and then probably 3 times a week.
Interesting. That's great. Yeah, I think obviously spending a lot of time close with the client to get their readout on each iterative element, but something else worth calling out, which I love the fact that we talk about like the knowledge transfer. So thinking about, okay, Valorum Reply is not going to be in the client forever. We're going to build a thing. We'll either build up some sustainability and support, and then we want to help the organizations run it themselves and figure out how to do it. Now, we'll support obviously a lot of different customer needs and different sizes and whatever it is, but it's important to know that we're not like, trying to jam ourselves in there. I think being able to, hey, we built this thing, we're going to teach you how to use it, and then let's have a conversation around what's next. Because I think there's, with all these innovation opportunities, we're now moving a lot faster. It presents a lot more opportunity for organizations to stay agile and relevant as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, we always can, but we try to teach so that they can continue to support themselves. But obviously, we offer the complete end-to-end for anybody who wants to go through that whole process.
I've loved seeing it happen in the sort of, even the 3 months that I've been here. So this is a bit more on the technical side, but how does AI support this sort of transition without bypassing the sort of prototyping and scaling and elasticity that's then created at POC time? How does it support this transition without bypassing all the standard mechanisms of security and quality and operational stability?
So it depends on the client and the client environment, and it depends on the tools that you've selected to use, because saying AI is pretty generic from my understanding. Given some of the GTs that we work with, there are certain tools that are not, I won't say allowed, they're not endorsed in their environment. So you may build something or prototype something using a certain tool. I'll keep names out of it, but you may build something using a certain tool and wish to move it into a client environment. So you prototype using tool X, you want to move it into enterprise client environment, and you can't actually do that. So you have to take prototype, refactor it, either as another prototype or as a POC in the client's environment using the acceptable tools. And then you do have to go through their both RAI process, their I'm trying to stay away from responsible AI processes, their security processes, application development processes, and compliance processes to get that POC endorsed for enterprise deployment. So then moving from POC to production is a whole nother process. But I think the main thing I would say is there are tools that fit every environment and compliance standard, and we make sure we use the right ones for the given environment.
Yeah, and I think there's a bunch of tools out there that are cloud-based. To name a few, there is Replit, there is Bolt.new, there's Lovable, there's Rorke. These are all cloud-based, designed sort of for consumery users to go and build an app, put it on the store, put it on the web, and boom, it's got a database built in, it's got all this other stuff, which is great, but to your point, when you want to deploy that inside an organizational boundary, you need to deploy it to your Azure stack, you need to put it inside your Entra environment, you need to, and whether you're, Google Cloud or whether you're AWS, same problem, same challenge. You have to take it out, remove all of the specific code from the prototyping platform, which is just not ideal. And so when we prototype, typically what we're doing is we may use whatever tool it is, like you said, and then rebuild it in the approved, like you said, the approved tools. But none of that is wasted time because we can prototype so fast.
Quick way.
We can iterate so fast. Then we can use that knowledge and then put that into our actual POC building. And then it's built from the ground up with good, solid, stable code practices without uncertain code content. So that's something that we've actually just been through a few times. And we're always learning, even ourselves. And that is something that there's a big opportunity to figure out that ongoing.
And I think getting people to understand that is a big deal. Like, I think in one of the meetings we were in, I put Replit and some of the consumer grade tools are like the flip chart in the meeting that you used to be in before you had laptops at your desk where the person was standing in front and they're drawing and everybody's contributing, right? And then at the time that you want to take the agreed prototype there and you want to move it into something that you can all work on, you're like, what is the software or the tool that our company uses to codify things in? It's the same concept, but you just have to decide on what those things are for your specific enterprise. And we know those tools because we've worked on them with each company, but we still need to convey that message to clients that the flip chart you don't throw away. The flip chart is a necessary stage for the process.
Exactly. That's a really poignant way of putting it. And I think there is some Microsoft stuff coming up. There's like their Frontier workflow and app builder, and I'm pretty sure given time they will start filling the gap of internal non-technical folks or even semi-technical folks. They're like, I need an app, and then they'll go and build an app that does their very specific workflow in an automated fashion. But until that happens, the size of the stuff that we're building, for entire organizations or for massive groups that are trying to manage things, this has been a trusted and tested approach which we've seen success in over and over again. So we're starting to veer now towards a bit more of the designy and non-techy stuff. So one thing we often hear in AI-augmented coding development is it touches far more than the developers and the coders themselves. So how are product teams, designers, and operations and various other groups working together during this process?
It has been really interesting to watch. So coming from a background working with touching just about every part of the SDLC, but in the order that it's usually required. It's been interesting to watch because with rapid prototype typing, especially, anybody can contribute. And I liken it to if you've ever stood over someone's shoulder and you've told them a few things, and like a sketch artist, right? When your friend's over the shoulder of the sketch artist and he's drawing you, and you're like, no, a little more hair on top, some ears, she's got a mole here. But you're steering the ship and navigating, and you're contributing to what the artist is doing. And you can all kind of do that over the shoulder, so that this piece of art comes out the other end. And it isn't required that you hand off requirements to someone who then writes user stories, who then puts them in the system so that the devs can begin coding or have a meeting and discuss which ones to prioritize in the sprint. It goes much more quickly than that, and it's much more fluid because as you're contributing, you can produce a requirements doc based on what you put into the system. If you need that artifact, you may or may not. And so it's like really sped up that process. And then, as I mentioned before, it's more pod based and it's less large development team based. So having worked at Microsoft for years and years too, those dev teams can be huge and they work on a feature. This allows pods to work on features or, specific capabilities, and they can meet up later to plug them into the overall system like larger feature teams do, but they do it very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've experienced that myself because I came in, I'm not a UI designer. I don't pretend to know the best way to have UI. I'm very much a visual person, as I've said. Like, I'll see a thing, I think, oh, that's a really good way of doing, how you stack all these things together without taking up too much screen real estate, or how you would. So then, I built a thing. I then reached out to our designer and I was like, hey, what's the standard for this? And they was like, first of all, use Fluid Design 2. And then here's an example of how I mocked it up in Figma, grabbed the image of that, and then threw that into my AI augmented coding assistant and said, hey, just make the page respond this way. Boom. So I've got the designer's SME skill set involved. And so now, as a sort of like prototypey PM type role, I can then lean on different people's skills to solve different specific problems. Like if I go to a database person, say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this or this, what do you recommend? And they would provide their SME knowledge on top of what the coding assistant is already providing to help steer the discussion, which I love. And then there's other examples where, you can iterate on the design in a room with people almost, which is great. So all of this is moving so fast. So what advice have you got for organizations to help keep pace with new things that are going to help their business, but staying informed around AI, and just stay relevant with all the changes that are going on?
Don't try everything. Try some things. Don't try in your production environment. Let smaller groups of people try different innovation tactics, and I mean that would be like one part of it. Another thing would be, don't be afraid of AI, but also don't go overboard. So I mentioned earlier that people are taking what was typically made using workflow, especially in partner ecosystem, and they're like, it's got to all be AI. It's just orchestration agents. Not necessarily the right approach, right? You still need to do the analysis and evaluate whether it makes sense to change your automation that way. So I think still staying pragmatic about where you make the changes, and especially since we've seen with layoffs and things, something as simple as you don't need to remove your entire workforce in favor of hiring a bunch of prompt engineers or agentic coders, knowing that you need to evaluate the market further and your specific business needs to see where you need to go as a business first.
I think that's really strong advice. Like we've heard that a few times. Is the problems that you have in the organization now are just going to be amplified. AI is a force amplifier. So any problems you've got in the org now around how you think about this stuff is just going to be more problematic if you don't decide some of those important aspects moving into this next phase. If you replace SMEs with AI experts, then you lose your SME skills. And then, over-indexing on AI is obviously costly. I think finding out, and we can do evaluations, like we started talking about the AI maturity model and how you get from one side of the maturity model to the other calmly and safely without, running around like your hair on fire because everyone has to have AI all the time. I think AI should be as a force multiplier, but not replace everything. It has its place, and it's sort of a really important job to figure out where its place is. And then, like you said, I really like that. It's like focus on a few things, not everything. As we close, it's quite clear we've worked together on a bunch of different projects. So I want to get your perspective on how AI has affected you in your business architecture role, when you can literally build anything so much faster. What do you find your day-to-day is changing into compared to what it was before?
So, you talked about personal, organizational, and then I can't remember what you named the third category, product. My organizational is changed tremendously. So the time it used to take me to just do things as a business architect, I think has reduced probably, I'm just throwing out a percentage, but probably close to 40 to 50% year over year from last year to this year, because most of the tasks that I used to do to create a business plan, to create retirement requirements, user stories, anything, even creating PowerPoints now that you know how to do them using Copilot, any of those things is just tremendously reduced. Mm-hmm. Now when I do comparative analyses, I have multiple spreadsheets. I can pull them together and I can have AI do it for me. So I think my brain power, hopefully I'm still getting smarter, but I think it's part of my collective brain power, and it's really helping me do a lot more in a lot more places this past year that we were really stretched with the number of clients that we worked in. Typically a consultant works in 1 or 2 different engagements, and we worked in maybe 3 or 4 or 5 at one time. Mm-hmm. We were able to do that because of AI.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that it's part of your brain power, which ultimately is, because you're using your knowledge, asking it questions, and then saying, hey, I need to figure this out. Help me figure this out in more detail. And I think ultimately it allows one person to do more when it's implemented correctly. And again, going back to organizational AI, one of the biggest things we talk about at Valorem Reply is don't build the agent, build the kitchen as an organization, so that then the users in the organization can build their own agents in the kitchen. So they can grab a little bit of HR stuff, or if they need some CRM sales data, or if they need some knowledge about this, or they need a workflow here, they can just assemble something that's meaningful, because every single person seems to have a different task that is important to them. And so building one agent, the ROI is pretty low. Building the kitchen is much more efficient. So then you teach people how to assemble their own stuff. Like no salesperson or marketing person generally is able to go and connect an agent to one of their back-end tools and then authenticate without putting credentials in the system and making it really dangerous in terms of security.
And it's upsetting because I want to.
Yeah, right. And we're not far away. That's the key. Is then now what happens is an organization, they serve up the agent that is pre-configured, connected with a bunch of prompts already built in, and then you can then just put that into a group chat or something with Copilot Studio or whatever, and then just say, hey, I need to onboard Bob, all right? Hey, could you find me the numbers for this? And all of a sudden it's now got the knowledge of the business through knowledge of the work IQ. It's got your agents through Foundry, serve stuff through Copilot. But this is all the internal stuff, right? So operating on the internal side of the business, and the grunt work that makes the external work look great is being accelerated, which I love. Well, thanks so much for your time, Jim. I could talk to you for hours about this, because I think we share similar perspectives, and we are on the front lines with a lot of the clients, and we get like always learning. The clients always bring us something new, which is super exciting, and we get to sort of change hats regularly. So and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope the conversation has helped you understand how strategies, roadmaps, and AI augmented coding execution come together to create real business value. If you missed any earlier episodes, there'll be a list in the description below, and now is a great time to go back and watch them. Look forward to seeing you on the last episode, sadly, of season 2 with Jason, and we'll chat more of an executive summary over all of the episodes we've talked about, and then wrap up before we conclude the season. Thank you so much for your time.